The research shows that humans can't experience a core emotion for more than 19 seconds if it's not reactivated, which is really, really stunning to think, wait, we're 19 seconds from changing the world. And we really believe we can stop wars by teaching people to do this.
But that is fascinating research as well, that if an emotion is not reactivated, and so people go, okay, how do we reactivate with each other? Well, part of it is that if we don't feel heard, then there is that reactivation. So if I come and I share with you whatever it is, I fear, oh man, I feel fear about missing the plane today. And you, Chris, respond by going, oh, you're going to be fine. Well, that actually reactivated the fear for me because I didn't feel really heard or regarded by you.
And Chris was trying to help. Chris
you
was
were
doing
trying
it
to encourage me.
She's trying to reassure Phyllis, going, oh, no.
Yeah.
Phyllis, it's going to be fine. We're going to be okay. But it actually reactivates the fear in Phyllis's brain.
Yeah. And it's just so fascinating that what I need is an audible listener. I need someone to go, oh, wow, yeah, I get that fear. Or, oh man, just an audible response that acknowledges that fear that I'm having is real for me.
Welcome, everyone. This is Chris O from PS Younger Self. I am really pleased to introduce you to an amazing husband and wife team who have built a transformative tool that helps couples around the world resolve conflict in, they say, 4 minutes, and then to forge deeper, healthier, thriving relationships. And their work was really born out of, they say, when they were struggling in their own marriage. 30, I believe, out of 40 years they've been married. It's really incredible. Dr. Glenn is a marriage and family therapist with a doctorate in clinical sexology who discovered why and the causes of couples disconnecting. And then it was Phyllis who then discovered how couples then connect, which is how they built their connection code, the transformative tool for couples to thrive and build healthier relationships. So welcome, Dr. Glenn and Phyllis. I'm really pleased to meet you both.
Yeah,
well, it's so fun to get to meet you too, Chris. And, we're always so grateful to be on the different platforms to talk about our story, but also not just our story, but the tools that transformed our lives. And I often say it kind of saved my life in a lot of ways beyond what I was even aware of at the time. And as you shared, we've been married actually 41 years. On the 3rd of
2 days.
Yeah, 2 days ago, we had our anniversary, 41 years.
Congrats.
And thank you. And the first 20 were really rough. And then we kind of learned how to avoid the trigger topics. And
there were only like 97 trigger topics.
There were just a few.
We just stopped talking.
Oh, well, logistically we talked, but we knew there had to be more. And Glenn went on a quest in his life to figure out, went back to school, got his doctorate to have time to do this research. He just believed that it just didn't make sense. You marry on purpose, you have a future dreams together, you want to grow old together, and then it's the person that you fight the most with and are wounded by the most, and you at times can't stand. And yet you chose this person. And so it's like that idea of there's got to be answers to all of this. It can't just be that we're all duped as young people into this whole arrangement. And so that is a lot of what the last decade of our lives have been dedicated to. And so, excited to be with you today and just to share parts of our story and then just the tools that bring connection, deep connection in relationships.
No, thank you for that. And I love exactly like when you shared a little bit more about how you guys came about to, go on this journey. And really when you said like, we were struggling for 20 years and it was really rough in the beginning, but you knew that there was an answer. To me, that just shows that you guys were still committed and not giving up, finding solutions. And that I feel like says so much about two people in a relationship that are fighting and continuing continuously choosing each other. And that's such a beautiful inspiration. And nowadays, I don't know, I'm not married, but I've been in some long-term relationships and just know from different people in my network that feel like we may give up as easily because we feel like, oh, maybe it can be better, or maybe there's something else. But really, I think fighting to find those answers, not giving up on each other, is such a beautiful inspiration. Can you maybe share a little bit? Because I feel that maybe a lot of other people can relate in different ways, and that's how people can really be more inspired on a deeper level. But what were some of the struggles that you said and the pain that you experienced, you said, for 20 years? Because that's a long time, and still not giving up on each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for us, I just want to go back to the beginning, because 24 hours before our wedding, we were excited about happily ever after. 48 hours after our wedding, we were shell shocked and just stunned.
Wow.
It's like, what just happened? What did we set ourselves up for? I was 20, she was 19. We figured we'd have about 70 years together. And we already were disillusioned and overwhelmed because we had missed so badly with each other. And then we spent the next 20 years just kind of reeling from that original rocky start.
Well, and it is interesting, the kind of energy that we put in to getting ready for the wedding, the kind of energy we thought we were setting ourselves up really well financially. And we felt that we had so many things in common, and kind of the core belief systems of life. We were on the same page, but it was almost like you're going towards a fairy tale, the wedding. And then for us, it was like when the dust settled and we looked at each other, there was just immediate wounding. And it was off to the start, some really big disappointments. And so it's kind of like wounding builds upon wounding. And we did not know how to resolve conflict. It was like I would be wounded, but I wouldn't tell him, or I would show him, but not tell him. And so he was clueless. And then there were a lot of things in just living everyday life together that we began to find that we had really strong opinions that were not the same. And at that time, we didn't understand psychological disorders. Glenn has numerous ones that he deals with, but he didn't even know that. And so there was, for us, some pretty big challenges right off the bat when we began to live together. We did not live together before we were married. And so it was just the everyday things that really brought the pain. And for years, we fought over the logistics of situations. We thought that there had to be a right and there had to be a wrong. And so we often found ourselves what we call now the courtroom, where we were trying to prove who was right, who was wrong. We felt like we were in front of a judge and a jury. And, at times we would actually sit down, with friends to go over a fight, or with a therapist to try to figure out now it was always about who's right and who's wrong. And oftentimes, I was the one who was right in the end, and others would say, well, Glenn, you're just wrong. And I would walk away almost like relieved. And yet I would look at my partner and I'd realize we're not any closer. Like maybe I won that fight, but we're still so disconnected, and he is so wounded by the courtroom scene. And a big turning point for us was about 20 years in, where we had what we call the dishwasher incident, which was an incident we'd had many times. This particular day, I came into the kitchen. I was going to either start dinner, and I thought, oh, I need to unload the dishwasher. I opened the dishwasher. It's already unloaded. So I turned to Glenn, who walks into the kitchen, and I say, babe, thanks for unloading the dishwasher. And he responded in a similar way that he always responded. And that was to say something like, well, that's not the only thing I've done today. And I was always irritated by his response. And I would say things like, can't you just say you're welcome? And, I would say, that's so ugh, or I would roll my eyes, or I would be like, turn away from him, like, oh, that's just so annoying that you can't just say you're welcome.
Yeah, and she would often respond with something which is accurate. She would say, I didn't say it was the only thing you did today.
Yeah.
And then I would say, well, I don't understand why you make such a big deal about it. You act like it's amazing that I accomplished something useful. And she'd go, I didn't say any of that. I'm just saying thanks for unloading the dishwasher. We had done that sort of interaction literally thousands of times because at that point we'd been married 20 years. What we had missed is that I happen to live with one of the most productive people on the planet. She happens to live with one of the lesser productive people on the planet. A lot of fun to have around, but I do struggle accomplishing tasks. So when she would say thanks for doing something productive, which I absolutely 100% believe was just genuine gratitude, she meant exactly the words that she was saying. I heard her making fun of me. I heard her going, whoa, isn't this hey, everybody, call the internet. Let's have a party. Glenn did something useful for a change. He's usually such a lazy, useless sack, but he did something productive. She didn't say any of that. She didn't think it. She didn't believe it. She didn't feel it. But that's what I heard. That's what I processed. Phyllis was in no way wrong to say thanks for unloading the dishwasher. But I would suggest Glenn is not wrong to experience what he experienced because I was not trying to experience that. That's just what happened for me internally. So that particular time, the first time in our relationship, Phyllis slowed down and got curious. And that was a big turning point in our relationship.
Yeah. That was huge in that moment because I didn't respond the way I normally had responded. Instead, I actually turned towards him instead of away from him. And I said, what do you hear me say when I say thank you for unloading the dishwasher? What happens for you when I say that? And his response really startled me.
Well, my first response was also snarky. I said, I hear you say what you said. And I didn't say the B word. I thought it.
True.
And,
Okay. Fair enough.
She said, and again, if she had, flipped me the finger and walked out of the room, that would have been appropriate. It was just so ridiculous trying to deal with me. And instead she stayed in it, which I just think takes so much courage, just to have the heart and the guts to go, this guy's impossible to deal with. He's being rude to me, but I'm going to find him. I'm going to find out what's happening for him. And so she repeated, she said, yeah, but what happens for you whenever I say that? And she slowed us down. She slowed me down. And then I was able to tell her the first time ever in our relationship. And she was stunned by what I shared with her.
Yeah. And so in that moment, what was so fascinating is that the response that I finally got from him actually brought really deep connection for us. And I was able to hear his experience. And it wasn't an argument over words or the logistics of the dishwasher. It was actually me hearing what he experiences when I say thank you. And it was such a powerful moment that I began using that terminology when he would respond in a way that didn't make sense to me over whatever. I would say, so babe, what's happening with you? What are you hearing me say? And through all of that, we began to see that, wow, we always thought it was all about logistics. If you just get the logistics right, whatever it is in your relationship, if it's the fact that shoes are left in the walkway and it drives you crazy and that's what you fight about, you think, well, if you would just keep your shoes where they're supposed to be, then we wouldn't fight. So see, that's all logistical, but it's actually what happens for each other in these circumstances that is what causes the disconnection and then ultimately what can cause connection. Because for Glenn, I just had no idea. I had no idea that my words, thank you, actually felt wounding to him. And it didn't logistically make any sense because if you asked everyone else on the planet, hey, do you think saying thank you is kind? Everybody would go, yeah, that's kind. Well, for Glenn, he didn't experience it as kind. He thought I was making fun of him because he viewed me as so much more productive, which what's interesting is that it was his perception of me, but I was thinking you're a productive person. You hold down a full-time job. You're self-employed. Like the judgment he made of himself wasn't even the judgment I had of him. but it's how he went through life. And so that was such a big moment. And as we began using those tools, just that simple thing changed so much for us. Then we started sharing it with our friends, and they were seeing the same results. Like, wow, just changing that lingo and being curious and leaning into the situation instead of just barking something back. And, it was interesting because one of the things that we also found, and this was more research down the road, but the difference between the question why and the question what happens. And, Glenn was definitely always in our relationship, the science guy, the why. He was always out of curiosity. He would ask me, why did you say that? Why did you do that? Why do you think that? Well, I every time felt like I was under a microscope. I was being interrogated. I was being attacked. And I always thought, oh my word, my answer has to be correct. My answer has to be perfect. And I would panic when he would ask me why questions. And in time, we realized, and through lots of research, found out that why is an accusation. What happens is an invitation. People respond differently. I mean, it's not just in marriage; it's across the board. If you are, if you have employees or you're a manager of people, and you change that, take out the why and ask what happens, you will get such a different response, and your people will feel that you're a team. You're a team and you're not an accuser who's coming in. Why didn't this stuff get done? That's how people experience it. Yeah. Versus, hey guys, what's happening on the project? Then people feel like you are caring and you're really interested in what is happening versus wanting or demanding an answer to the question why.
Yeah, and so many of the connection codes developed, we discovered them from just observing interactions, observing relationships. And that was one of the things that we observed early on is every time one person asks another person why, and why did you do that? Why do you feel that way? Why do you think that? Why do you believe that? Why do you act like that? They would disconnect. They would sometimes it was neutral, but they never connected. And we actually started charting this, and it was 0% of the time that they would connect. So after a while, we're like, oh, well, duh, that's an obvious one. Let's throw that out. So we encourage your listeners, just do your own research in your own life for the next month. Don't ask anybody why, ever. Just ask them, so what happens for you there? And further down the road with the research, we learned the phrase, I missed it. To say to somebody, I think I'm missing something there. Could you help me get what happened for you? Because you matter to me and I want to get it. I want to get your experience. And I think I'm missing a piece of it. Could you help me get it? And that became, and initially we just observed and watched what happened with people. And then we began feeding people these phrases, and we observed their interaction. And it was stunning, the difference, just that shift. And Phyllis was running a company that she had founded at the time. So she was very busy with that. But I remember as we did the research and I would come home and I'd go, babe, I think we found a piece. I think we found something. And she was only half listening because she was incredibly busy with her business. But I was just startled by that. And that, as you mentioned before, Chris, that I did all this research. And just for the record, I'm the educated one. Phyllis is the smart one. She actually figures the things out that matter. I do all the hard work. But which makes us an incredible partnership. So I'm doing all this research, and I was ecstatic that I found what causes people to disconnect. I thought that was spectacular. Well, then Phyllis is like, well, yeah, but babe, if we just find out what happens, what causes people to disconnect, okay, so great, now everybody's disconnected. And she said, what if we reverse it? Is that what causes people to connect? And she was right. And then we started feeding the phrases to people, and I was mesmerized at the change. Again, just like that, he would ask her why, and then I go, hey, could you find out what happens for her? Could you just ask her what happens for her and just tell her that you're missing part of it? And he would do that, and she would literally lean towards him. We call it geographical. She would geographically move closer, and then she would relationally move closer. And as we're observing this, I'm like, are you kidding me? It's that simple. That's part of the power of the connection codes is it is so simple. It is so implementable. You don't have to go learn Latin before you can do this. This is already within us. We just have forgotten it. It got deactivated earlier in life, and we just want to reactivate it for people.
Wow, that was so powerful. And I saw myself in some of the examples that you shared. And I feel like that's exactly what, a lot of couples like struggle through. And especially when you said that. So then if I'm interpreting this correctly, the disconnection is when couples focus more on logistics, who's
Mm,
right, who's
Mhm.
wrong, without trying to, and in using words like why, which was so huge. And I don't know if you saw me kind of like my eyes widen because I'm kind of like you, Dr. Glenn, where I like to ask the why questions, but I
mhm.
didn't realize, Phyllis and Dr. Glenn, that leading with that why or asking that
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
would come across accusational because from my
Mhm.
perspective, I understood as like, because I'm a problem solver. If I understand the why, we can get to the root of the problem.
Right.
But it's all about the delivery too, right? And
Mm,
what I also really loved, and it was so beautiful because now that I'm thinking, then the connection is because we all individually have our own subjective realities and our own individual
yeah.
experiences,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Despite if we read the same book or grew up in the same family, we
Yes.
all have our individual experiences. And
Mhm.
as a
Mm,
human, we all really want to feel safe, loved, and heard,
mm.
right? Like
Yep.
heard.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So so the connection is creating communication or a space where we can be heard,
Mhm.
we can be understood for our experiences, not saying that you have to say you're right or I'm wrong, but just can you see where maybe
Mhm.
my experience and why I acted this way or why I may be interpreting it this way so I can feel heard. Is that
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. And, I love what you were saying as far as you can grow up in the same family.
Mm,
You can read the same book and have a very different response and reaction to that situation. And that is part of it because just like me saying thank you for unloading the dishwasher, everyone else in my world at the time would say, well, yeah, that's the appropriate thing to say. But see, it was about his experience. It was
mm.
what was happening for
Yeah.
him in hearing that verbiage, and I could never get it. And it
Mm,
would just always cause a hurtful response. And
mm,
I would just, I was so tired of it that I was like, just roll my eyes and walk away kind of scenario.
mm,
And then it's like that yuck feeling that settles into the relationship for
mm,
sometimes hours, sometimes even days over a simple statement like, thank you for unloading the dishwasher.
mm,
So when I became curious and leaned in and was like, what
yeah.
happens for you when I say that? Then it was like the clarification, it made total sense to me.
Mm,
Like once he was able to explain, and I know that for me, that question, when someone says, what's happening for you? Um, I have had to learn a lot about being able to slow my own self
mhm,
down and really tune into myself. As someone who is very task
mm,
oriented, and I learned as a child that being productive was very much the right way to live.
mm,
That is what was in our family given like accolades to. So at a young age, I learned, oh, to make the world happy, be productive. To make everyone around you happy, be productive, which can be
and to keep
very,
out of trouble.
yeah. And as a
Yep.
child, it kept me out of trouble.
Mm,
But it became very damaging to me as
mm,
an adult because I turned into a workaholic. Tasks were
mm,
more important to me than people. So there was a danger side to
mm,
that I had to learn. So in all of this, when Glenn's doing all this research, learning these tools, and then for that whole thing to be turned on to me, like what's happening for you, I never liked the question because that meant I had to slow myself down and I had to actually get curious about myself. And that was difficult for me. Um, I had to learn a lot about emotion,
mm,
which was a ton of Glenn's work. And that's a really foundation of connection
yeah.
codes is emotional health and how we are not taught how to tune into our emotions. We
Mm,
complicate even that whole topic. And so the research, there was tons and tons of research done And for me, it kind of gets back to the science. Like I was just blown away I was 50 years old before I learned that my brain houses a region that fires emotion. I didn't know that. I thought you could opt out. And I had done that. And I had even said for years, Glenn has enough emotion for both of us. I don't do emotion. I said that for years. And I never,
And said it with pride that,
yeah, I was very, yeah,
and she looked phenomenal. I mean,
right.
everybody wanted Phyllis. Everybody liked her. Everybody wanted her on their committees,
Sure.
their activities,
Yeah.
because she was
Because
phenomenal.
I knew how to get stuff done and I knew how to delegate and get big projects done. But I didn't know how to tune in. And I for sure didn't understand that I had emotion. Well, of course, in learning that, I also understood the downside. Like the body keeps the score. If you're not in tune with your emotions, if you're not processing your emotions, you're storing them in your body. And that is not how our bodies were created. And eventually your body will break down. And that's what happened to me at 50. So then I had to learn all of this. And Glenn was doing all this research. And it was so mind blowing to me. And it made so much sense. Like, oh, this is why I have trouble answering the question, what's happening for you? Because I'm not tuning in to what is happening to me, like ever. And so I had to learn the emotion side of my life and my body and how to tune in. And one of the tools that that we created at that time is what we call the core emotion wheel.
Okay.
And for your listeners, we actually have a free download for that because we believe this is what was so life-giving and life-changing for us to, in a simple way, it's what we call our 4-minute tool. How to resolve conflict in 4 minutes is by using this tool, because sometimes you go, okay, I just need to start asking what's happening with you. Yes, that's part of it. You also have to learn how to respond to the other person when they share what's happening with them. But also, sometimes we don't have 30 minutes to hear what's happening. So we have to simplify things and get to the core. And that's where the core emotion wheel comes in. And it's simply a tool that helps us tune in to ourselves. And then we can express it and communicate it to the other person, whether it's your significant other or whether it's a coworker or a family member or a neighbor. It's a tool that works with all age people. It's just a way to tune in and go, okay, what's happening? So it's more about what is happening in our brains, how to tune in to what is firing, which I think is so fascinating that if we were hooked up to a brain scan all the time, we would know what was happening for us. But we do have that technology. Most of us don't have it in our homes where we can all day long be going, oh, well, look at that. I'm feeling some fear this morning. And it's just fascinating when we have other tools that we can actually just have all the time.
Yeah, and we actually know now that we can read your emotional activity in your brain with a 93.7% accuracy rate. So these emotions are firing. And again, Phyllis didn't think she had any. She had ignored them, suppressed them, denied them, stepped over them, stepped around them for so long. She didn't even think they existed. So this was revolutionary for her to realize, and for me too, we're two very, very different people, but I didn't know what to do with my emotions. I knew I had tons, and I knew that they strangled me all the time. I didn't know what to do with them. And that's part of the power of the connection codes, is it helps any type of person, regardless of your personality profile. It helps you to bring it down to the core emotions. Because what the research shows is that humans have 5 neural regions that are kind of the central command center for emotions. Emotions occur throughout the body, but the limbic system is the central command center. That's true for every human on the planet. So this is a universal language. Everyone knows this. It's already inside of us at birth, so we don't have to go learn it like Latin. With those 5 regions, there are 8 core emotions. Again, true for every human on the planet. So it's a shared language. And the amazing thing is, whenever I share a core emotion with Phyllis, it actually activates the same region in her brain, and it becomes a shared human experience. And we bond through that. So if I'm able to say to her, I felt some fear about this, it tickles the fear region of her brain, and she tunes into me. She can't help it. It's just automatic. It's the human coding.
Just
Right.
by sharing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, the brain scans are really, really clear on this. So this isn't a theory or a philosophy or a neat idea. That is what happens with humans. So when I share at the core, authentically, vulnerably, what's happening for me, it bonds us together. And then, and I just want to mention one thing about logistics, because there's a research project came out not too long ago where they had somebody watch a scene, and then the next day they would ask them what happened in the scene. And then a week later, a month later, 6 months later, and a year later, the people don't even agree with themselves. So 6 months later, they're telling a story that completely it contradicts the story that they themselves told the day after the event happened. So when we argue logistics, no one's narrative is ever 100% accurate. 10 people can watch the same event and come up with 10 different versions of what they experienced. And they really did experience that. It's not that they're lying or they're stupid. They really did experience it. But if once we realize that, I don't even agree with myself, 6 months from now, I'm going to tell the story about that event differently than I'm doing today. So if we're basing everything on logistics, we're doomed because we don't even agree with ourselves. So we have to get to the emotions, and logistics exist. It's not that they don't exist or we don't talk about them. But if we don't get to the core emotions underneath it, then we're not going to be able to connect, because humans connect through core emotions, not through logistics. And we're many centuries into believing that humans connect through logistics, and it's not true. We actually connect through emotions.
Wow.
And for those that are not aware of the emotion side of their brain, like my story, that is what, this tool that we've created it allows you to tune into yourself. It's an exercise where you're going, okay, I've got to learn how to tune in. I'm the curious. It's like I was curious as to what was happening with Glenn, but I eventually became curious into what was happening with me. Wow. And I learned the value of that. And I learned kind of the hard way. Like when my body started not cooperating, I was like, wow, what is happening? And I'd never had those experiences. And so it was like that idea of I had to learn how to tune into fear, how to tune in to sad, how to tune into lonely. And I had to learn what they felt like within my own body so that I could identify them. And then it was so connecting for me to be able to share that with Glenn, which is what the core emotion wheel exercise is all about, is just on a daily basis to take those 4 minutes and tune into each other. And we do it more naturally now. Like we can just in the moment say, I felt hurt by what you just said. And we can tune into each other really quickly. And then we also talk about the tools you mentioned that we have master classes. And they're, they really do break all of this down so that you are in a sense, you have the tools when it's over. You're that expert of, now I know how to connect with people more deeply. I know now how to be a really good listener. There's a lot about that. Like if I share my hurt with Glenn, I want him to just make space for that. I want him, he doesn't have to fix it. He doesn't have to give me all the reasons, why he did it. I don't need that. I need him just to hear me. That is so huge and so important. And that's part of what we talk about as well in our tools and in our masterclass is how to be really good listeners. And most of us, not out of a bad heart, we just are fixers. We are encouragers. We think that that's a good way to be, and to find out that no, you're actually disregarding the person's experience when you try to fix them, or you try to give them solutions, or you try to encourage them. They feel disregarded. And most of us don't know that. We're not aware of how much we affect each other by the way we respond. And it's like, it really is so incredibly and easy, simple. These tools are really simple, which is what we wanted, because I needed them to be simple. When this all happened, when I was 50, I was running my company and I didn't have time to do research. And I told Glenn that I'm not going to read any books. I'm not going to do the research. I need this to be super simple and quick. And I felt like I was always the driving force for him, because he's loves the research and he loves to read. And I'm like, babe, that's great for you, but I need it quick and simple, because I have a lot going on in my life. And so a lot of these tools were created because that's what I needed, but it's now universal. Like people of all languages, they can, the tools are so simple that you can take it into any language and translate it very quickly and easily, which is phenomenal because we've not done that work. We've not translated it into all these different languages. And we, people email us daily telling us, wow, this has transformed my life. And it works. And that's the beauty of these things, is that they're not complicated at all.
Yeah. And the connection codes are so human that they've spread to over 60 different nations, not because we're good marketers. We stink at all of that, but they're just organic. And it's within people. They start implementing the tools, they experience it, and they're like, whoa. And then they just can't help themselves. They tell their friends, they tell their mom, they tell their neighbor, they tell their cousins. And because of that, it's spread to over 60 nations now. So it's very, very cross-cultural, cross-language. This is just the human condition. And that's the reason that it has spread so much and why it's so powerful.
Exactly, because it really is rooted in that human connection.
Yeah.
So because I find it really fascinating, and I believe now I understand like the core emotion wheel that you developed and you spoke about. That is one of the tools to help us process our own emotion by tuning into ourselves, as well as understanding our partner's emotion. Would it be okay if you help us kind of live now during this recording, give us an example? Like, how does that work?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to do that. So we will demonstrate in real time how to use the core emotion wheel, which we do have a free download for your listeners.
Yeah, let me mention that with the download, there are rules. There's about 5 or 6 rules that we really, 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 really plead with people to use the core emotion wheel according to the rules. We researched this endlessly, exhaustively, and so the rules are pretty emphatic.
Well, we don't want you to weaponize it. So
tools can easily become weapons.
So we have the free download. We have a video actually teaching how to use it. And then we have the written PDF of the rules to make sure you're using it correctly so it doesn't become a weapon. So you want to go first?
Sure. Okay. So let's see. For me, I woke up this morning and I felt some fear because we have a lot to do today. We're heading out on a 16-day cruise tonight. So I was thinking, oh my gosh. It's here. We've got a ton of stuff to do. So I really got hit with fear that I was going to miss something. I felt hurt yesterday at one point. I was just sharing some stuff with you, and it felt like you weren't tuning in. You weren't really present with me. Wow. And you're busy. I know that, but I just felt a little bit. And there's some loneliness in that. Just another pain experience. Like, hey, hello, I'm over here. Pay attention to me. Let's see. I think in that moment too, I probably felt some shame that, I'm not valuable enough to her that she would tune in to me. She's distracted and focusing on tasks, which is awesome that you get so many tasks done, but sometimes I end up feeling a little bit less than. Let's see. Anger. Feel a lot of anger just about getting the connection codes tools around the world. We've got to do this. I'm very driven for that. Wow. There's so much power in it. It's changed our lives so much. And I know it's changed thousands and thousands of people. And we lack about 7.9 billion more people to reach. So we gotta be productive, gotta get it going. A lot of joy just being with you, a lot of joy about going on this cruise with you. We've never done a cruise this long, so that's going to be pretty crazy. A little bit of sadness in the fear because we planted a whole bunch of stuff on our property, and I feel sad when some of our plants struggle and they die this summer. If our people don't take care of them, they're going to be dead when we get back. And let's see, guilt. I think I'm missing guilt. When's the last time I felt guilt? I missed with a friend the other day something she'd shared, and I just wasn't really present with her. I was going too fast. And I realized that a little bit later. And I was actually able to go back to her and say, I felt some guilt that I missed on that with you. It was really cool. It was a very connecting moment for us.
What about shame?
I said shame. I forget what I said, but I did say shame.
Oh, okay. All right. So for me, I immediately think of sad because I didn't sleep good at all last night. So my body's really sad today. I was hurt at the movies the other night. In our interaction and didn't express that in the moment. So definitely guilt about that. But more recent, I think this morning I felt guilt because I reached out to our producer instead of just looking online for the information, and that really felt
Oh.
like guilt. I feel some shame in that don't slow myself down in that situation, and I just quickly turn to someone else to solve it instead of just getting online. Anger. I felt anger the other day when I could not get the computer to do what I needed to do, which is why I watched that YouTube video to learn all I could about it. So anger drove me to do that.
Yeah.
I feel fear. Yeah, definitely when we travel, I feel fear because of all the loose ends. I always feel like there's so many loose ends. So I feel fear that I won't get everything done today and that things will fall apart while we're gone because I missed on some things. Let's see. I mentioned hurt. I mentioned sad, lonely. I think sometimes when we get ready to go on a trip, I feel alone in a lot of the tasks of just the logistical things that have to close the house up, to get it all ready, to make sure all the things are taken care of when we're gone for a long time. Feel alone in that. So that's the lonely, I would say. Joy. Oh my word. Yes. Tons of joy of being able to unplug and go away and be on a cruise for 16 days is ultimately like, wow, so much joy.
Love it. Thank you.
Wow, that was really, really beautiful. Thank you so much for walking us through that. I want to ask a follow-up question because I observed something like it was very beautiful and it was very obvious there was active listening between the two of you when each person was speaking and sharing their core emotions and how they were feeling throughout recent period. What I also observed, and I want to ask this follow-up question because in my own personal experience, when I've tried to share my like feeling, like let's say an example, like I felt that I wasn't valued because of X, Y, and Z, not again because I was trying to accuse my partner, but I've observed that he, from a loving place, felt bad and immediately said, sorry, X, Y, and Z. But what I observed, neither one of you ever said sorry, but it was really active listening, a lot of like leading with curiosity, like that beautiful word that you used earlier, like, wow. And even your facial expression, I think trying to process, oh, wow, like you were feeling that. And so the reason why I share this observation and link it to my personal experience where honestly I wasn't expecting or demanding an apology. And I felt like, especially in my most recent experience, where it made him feel like every time I brought up something and he apologized that he wasn't doing enough or that he was failing in the relationship, which was never my thought actually at all. It's the most beautiful, mature relationship and loving. It was never that. It was always more about, again, back to what you guys pointed out earlier, was just more me expressing myself, want to be understood and heard from that perspective, not accusing you of saying sorry. So sorry for this long-winded type of
it's beautiful.
comment, but so that was just very interesting. Neither one of you said sorry, but really active listening. How can we create that space where a partner doesn't have to feel like they need to apologize? Because again, I'm not accusing, and now I learned from you that when I ask a why, that's being accusatory, but it's more like, I just want to be understood. Like, this is just my experience.
Yeah, you had mentioned before, which I think is so powerful, Chris, that part of the human condition is we must feel seen and heard. That's true for every human on the planet from birth. It's throughout the lifespan. So Phyllis feels very, very seen and heard by me. And the reality is, and I think people don't slow down enough to contemplate this, Phyllis could live perfectly for the next year. She could do and if we're voting, I vote for that. There we go. Phyllis is perfect. She's not going to miss on anything for the next year. I'm still going to experience what I experience. It's not her fault. We're not blaming Phyllis. I'm not accusing Phyllis. When she said, thanks for loading the dishwasher, that's not an evil thing to say. She doesn't need to apologize for saying thanks for unloading the dishwasher. She's not bad, wrong, dumb, anything. That was actually a good thing that she was doing. But I did feel hurt by it, and I did feel shame. That's one of the things we really emphasize in the masterclass, the Foundations masterclass. Just emotions happen to you. Phyllis said, thanks for unloading the dishwasher. I felt shame. I wasn't trying to feel shame. What dummy wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'm going to have a day filled with shame? Nobody does that. Emotions happen to you. Now, you're responsible for your next action, your next behavior. You're not responsible for the emotion. And people talk all the time, oh, you need to learn to control your emotions. You can't control your emotions. There's no such thing. You can control your behavior. You can control your next action. And when you become a connection coder, your next action is to process the emotion that just hit you. And also, and I don't know if we've talked about this, but emotions are not good, bad, right, or wrong. They just are. They just exist, just like oxygen. Oxygen isn't good or bad. It just is. What we do with those emotions end up making them good or bad. And unprocessed emotion becomes very, very damaging. But emotions themselves, the core emotions, are just messengers. They're tapping us on the shoulder, conveying a message to us. We tune into them. And this happens in 2 seconds. I'm not talking about an hour and a half here. This happens in a second, 2 seconds. Then I process it because there's so much more power in co-regulation than self-regulation. I process it with Phyllis or whoever I'm with. And we process through this stuff in 20 seconds. The research shows that humans can't experience a core emotion for more than 19 seconds if it's not reactivated, which is really, really stunning to think, wait, we're 19 seconds from changing the world. And we really believe we can stop wars by teaching people to do this.
Well, before we talk about that, I want to make sure because I want to answer your question, Chris, about the I'm sorry. No, you didn't. That's okay. That's okay. So,
That sounds like Glenn.
yeah, let me go back to that. And that's part of our research too, that we found very fascinating about the phrase I'm sorry. And part of it started with our own relationship where I was very quick to say I'm sorry. Part of it was I didn't want the conflict. And I was under the assumption that if I went ahead and owned it and said, I'm sorry, I'm to blame, that it would bring the result that I wanted, which was him to be like, oh, it's okay, babe, we're good. And it never did that. It was like my saying, I'm sorry, communicated to him, we're done talking about this. And you just need to forgive me. And we need to be fine. And he didn't feel heard. He didn't feel validated in his experience. He felt actually the opposite of that. Like he felt like I wasn't regarding him at all. And so through a lot of research and observation of other couples, other humans, because it's fascinating. If you think about it, sometimes kids are the best teachers, but you look at, in a family setting or even a school setting, kids that get into a fight and you want Johnny to just simply say, I'm sorry to Bobby. And you think that word makes everything better, and it doesn't at all. It's finding out what's happening, guys. Okay, Johnny. Okay, Bobby, slow down. What's happening here? And then to get them at the core of the emotion of what's really happening is where you get the results that you are looking for. So we always say apologies are free. Sure, throw one in there, but it doesn't get you what you're really looking for. Right. And it can often be a weapon. Like, I'm sorry, you need to apologize. I mean, my apology, you need to forgive me. I've said I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's what we observed watching interactions was apologies virtually never. It wasn't 0%, but it was like 0.0 something percent of the time connected people. So again, if you got a 99% chance of something failing, well, don't do that. That's the odds are against you. So and again, then we started feeding that to people and we would say, you know what, don't apologize for that. Just tell her what happens for you. And then he would be able to go, babe, I feel a lot of guilt that I missed that with you because you're so valuable to me. You're important to me. And I just really missed it. Dang it. I hate that. Well, he hasn't apologized, but they connected. And we watched this happen over and over and over again. And Phyllis and I don't apologize to each other at all, haven't in years. And again, I'm not talking about if I open the refrigerator door and bump her, I'll go, oh, sorry, babe. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, relational stuff. We haven't apologized in years and years and years because and again, I don't care if somebody throws one in there, whoop-de-doo, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. but don't count on it to connect you because it's probably not going to.
Wow. No, that is so powerful. Thank you so much for helping me understand that
Mm.
and how you said that, yeah, like it could even be or when you said, Phyllis, that from your perspective, or I think where you have seen people used it maybe to just
Mm.
assume or wanting to resolve the conflict, just to
Mhm.
avoid the conflict. And that
Right.
makes a lot of sense again, because when I'm trying to like link it back to my personal experience, but that's just, and probably not with bad intention on the
Yeah. Oh,
partner.
absolutely.
Of course
Hmm.
Mhm.
not, because, most of us don't like conflict, but just
Right.
assume,
Hmm.
okay,
Right.
if I say sorry, then we can just resolve this really quickly and move on with our happy relationship. But if you do that, you're not, to your point, you're not connecting, you're not getting to the root of the problem,
Mm.
and that cycle probably repeats itself and then
Mhm.
probably ends up in either 20-year of unhappy relationship or however long.
Right.
So thank you for really helping me
Hmm.
understand that. And yeah, because I had to experience that and really for myself wanted to understand like how can I communicate to my partner that I
Mhm.
don't need the sorry. I just want to be heard and
Yeah.
understood and
Yeah.
realize where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that's so huge, and I think that with the listeners, they may be going, okay, I'm going to learn this, but then how do I get the people all around me
Mm.
to understand that I just want to be heard? And so it does take some vulnerability and some
Yeah.
conversations. When you
Absolutely.
learn these tools, you have to be willing to go, hey, I've learned some pretty powerful tools. Can I share that with you?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, you go, well, my partner's not willing to, they're not willing to watch or learn or
Mm.
listen. And you go, yeah, but you start using these for yourself, they're going to see the change in how you
Yeah.
interact, and they're going to see and notice that you've taken why out of the interaction, and you've started using this term, what's happening for
Mm.
you, and things like that make such a huge difference, that then the curiosity of the other person is really uh kind of triggered, and they want to go, okay, so what is this about? And then you're able to go, well, here's what happens in this. And then also just asking, like, I really don't need an apology, I just need you to make space for what
Mm.
I'm experiencing. And
Mhm.
sometimes people just don't even know.
And to
They
ask,
Yeah,
just like, could you do that with me?
could you do that?
Yeah.
And it's kind of that, wow, that really does make a difference. And I know we're almost out of time, but
Mhm.
Glenn mentioned the 19 seconds, so I hate to leave that hanging, but that
Yes,
is
please.
fascinating
Very
research as well, that if an emotion is not reactivated. And so people go, okay, how do we reactivate with each other? Well, part of it is that if we don't feel heard, then there is that reactivation.
Mm.
So if I come and I share with you whatever it is, I fear, oh man, I feel fear about missing the plane today. And you, Chris, respond by going, oh, you're going to be fine. Well, that
Mhm.
actually reactivated the fear for me because I didn't feel really heard or regarded by you.
And
But
Chris was trying to help.
yeah,
Chris was
you were
doing it
trying to
out of kindness.
encourage me,
He's
right?
trying. She's trying to reassure Phyllis, going, "Oh no, 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 no,
Yeah.
Phyllis, it's going to be fine. We're going to be okay." But it actually reactivates the fear in Phyllis's brain.
Yeah. And it's just so fascinating that you what I need is an audible listener. I
Mm.
need someone to go, "Oh, wow, yeah, I get that fear." Or, "Oh, man, just an
Yeah,
audible response that acknowledges that fear that I'm having is real for me.
yeah. Because Phyllis isn't trying to feel fear;
Yeah.
she just feels fear. It's just brain
No,
And
chemistry.
exactly.
it doesn't have to be a fear for you at all. Like
Right.
you've never gone to the airport feeling that fear of possibly missing your plane.
Mm.
And so there doesn't have to be a relatability. It doesn't have to be a shared
Right.
experience, but I just need you to not downplay my fear
Mm.
by
Mhm.
saying, "You're going to be fine. Oh my word, you never miss your plane." Well, that doesn't change the fact that the fear region of my brain is going crazy this morning because I am waking up thinking, "Oh my word, we're going to miss the plane. We're going to miss the plane."
Mhm.
And it's that is so powerful. And this research is just phenomenal to think that to realize that, wow, if you just make space for what my experience is for 19 seconds,
Mm.
then I'm able to release it out of my body, and
Yeah.
then I'm good. Just give me 19 seconds, which is so crazy. Because I think if I come to you and I say, man, Chris, I feel really hurt by what you said. And you go, oh, I didn't mean that. Oh my word, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. Well, you actually just now reactivated that hurt for me. Yeah. And it's so crazy to think, oh, if you just sit in it with me for a minute or 19 seconds, not a minute, 19 seconds and go, oh, wow, what's happening with that? And then you make space to hear how I was hurt, then it actually releases from my body.
Yeah, and that's what we call the 3 phrases, and we cover that extensively in the masterclass. But it was what we call the ooh, what's happening, and I missed it to you. And we encourage your listeners, just try that for the next 2 weeks. When someone says something to you, go, oh, wow, okay. And there's lots of versions of the ooh, but just go, oh, so what happened for you there? What am I missing? Because you're missing it because they haven't said it yet. You're not missing it because you're bad or wrong or stupid. You're missing it because they haven't told you. Yeah, but that's such an open, safe invitation to go, hey, could you help me get what happened for you? I think I might have missed some of that. Could you help me get it? And people will rush into that to have the opportunity to be seen and heard because, as we mentioned before, that's just the human condition.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's so fascinating. I'm so glad you guys expanded on that 19-second of our emotions being reactivated because I found that truly fascinating too. And I know we're running out of time, but why, first of all, why is it 19 seconds? That sounds like such a odd number. Like what is happening?
Well, the research has been done 3 times that I know of. For many years, we said that emotions process through in 90 seconds, and then eventually, and that's for an individual alone, self-regulating. Well, Dr. Jim Cohn did the research that says you expend 80% less glucose when you co-regulate than when you self-regulate. Well, then somebody started reverse engineering that and implementing it. And that's just what the research, one project said 18 seconds, 2 projects says 19 seconds. So we just watched people do it. And 19 seconds later, and again, just like we've been talking, you think about it, Phyllis comes to me and says, I felt hurt by what you said. And I go, oh, wait, what happened for you, babe? I think I might have missed something. She says, well, you said that thing. And I don't know, I just felt some pain. And it just felt hurtful, the way that you said that. And I go, oh, okay, so what else happened for you? And then she goes, I think I felt some shame too. I felt kind of embarrassed that you'd said that thing. I'm like, oh, yeah, I hear that. And we're working our way towards what we call the 4th phrase. And I'll ask her, so babe, what do you need? And she'll say, oh, I don't need anything. I just need to tell you that. I just need to process that with you. And we're about 19 seconds in at that point, and it's completely processed. And again, I wasn't trying to hurt her. It has nothing to do with Glenn, even though it looks like it's all about Glenn. It's actually about what happened inside of Phyllis.
Well, and the way that research is done is through brain scanning. So that's why they came up, it's not like they come up with the 19 seconds just out of a hat. It's more watching a brain scan. They see that an emotion dissipates and resolves itself within 19 seconds if it's not reactivated.
It's not reactivated.
And so now, so much of science, because of, the equipment we now have, because, it's just phenomenal what we are now able to see that we could not see. The research, I would say, has changed so much because of the equipment that we have.
Yeah, and if you think about if you throw a rock in a pond, it does a big splash, and then there's rippling effects, but that goes away pretty quickly. But if you have a string attached to that rock and you keep doing it, well, now it's going to go on endlessly. And that's what we observed, was that these emotions can fire for literally days and weeks and years. So Phyllis felt hurt by me. I never slowed down with her. I was never safe for her. I never helped her process it. She did not feel seen. She did not feel heard. And now that pain stays with her for 6 months, or who knows how, literally for years, because it continually gets reactivated.
And those 4 phrases that you spoke about, so they create then the safe space between 2 people for one or, both of you to be heard and understood. And then that creates the connection.
Yeah. Although I would say that they may not feel understood. They just feel seen and heard, because there's lots of things that happen with me that Phyllis doesn't understand. I deal with a number of psychological disorders personally. She doesn't understand those, and she would never understand those, but she just gets that that's what's happening for
Got
me,
it.
and vice versa. There are things that happen for Phyllis that don't happen for me. They just don't. She feels fear about something and I don't. She's
Yeah.
she's a mysophobe. She can't stand mice. Mice don't throw me at all. I have zero fear about mice. She
Yeah.
has mega fear about mice. So I don't understand that fear. I know that there are no attack mice. They're not stalking you out to get you and rip your
I don't
face
know
off.
about that.
But Phyllis thinks maybe they are. Actually, they're assassin mice, and
Yes.
they're looking for you. So she just experiences fear about it, and I don't.
That's fascinating. Okay. So you don't have to be understood. That's so interesting
Absolutely.
because
Yeah.
I feel like in partnerships too, like at least for me, I've communicated this and with my partners, like I just want to be understood, but it's
Hmm.
not about necessarily being understood because again, we have our different unique experiences. It's
Yes,
about being
Mhm.
absolutely.
heard and
Hmm.
seen, and that's not the
Yep.
same.
Yep.
Wow, very powerful. I
Mhm.
have a tradition before we wrap up. I ask this one question, and this I wish we had more time, but that is why our audience will connect with both of you
Mhm.
offline through your own channels and this free downloadable core emotion wheel that you so graciously are sharing with us. My final question, it's a tradition, and why my channel is called PS Younger Self.
Mm.
If you can go back to your younger
Mm.
selves, Phyllis and Dr. Glenn, it could be maybe in the 40 plus years you've been together,
Mm.
to pass on one piece of wisdom
Mm.
to remind him or her to live fully in the present and on your terms, healthier and happier. What is that one piece of wisdom you would like to pass on?
Mm. Yeah, well, for me, and I feel a little shame saying this because it just sounds like a plug. But when we say that the connection codes are the human condition, we did not invent the connection codes. We discovered them, but we're not the creators. We're just the founders. The connection codes existed long before we were born. So, but I would say to my younger self, learn the connection codes. Learn how you connect deeply, safely with your partner. Because I think, oh my gosh, how much wounding, how much trauma, how much pain with many relationships, but my most important one, how much pain did we experience together? Because I just didn't know. I did not know the connection codes. I did not know how to connect with her. And I wish my younger self, and that's the reason we're trying to push this to 8 billion people on the planet, because it works. We're mesmerized by this. We're startled by it now. And to think, man, we sure would have been better off if we had learned this in our teens. It would have been amazing.
I think the way I would answer that question is that it's not about the logistics, but it's about the human experience. And if I had known that in our first, even while we were dating, it would have changed everything for us, because we thought for too long that it was about logistics. And if you just do the thing right, then we won't fight. And it wasn't about that. It was about the experience underneath. So, what was happening underneath, about the emotion. So, not the logistic, but the emotion underneath it all is what destroys relationships.
Beautiful. So please then tell us where our audience can connect with you and find you online to really
Yes.
discover the connection code and get their own,
Yeah.
experience and growth out of it.
Love that. So if your listeners go to connectioncodes.co/younger, they will get that free download and the video and the PDF and all that. And that will start them on this journey to get other things that will come through emails and things. So, and then we've mentioned the masterclass several times. So we actually have a coupon code. If they go, hey, we just want to jump right in. We want all of it. We don't want just a little part of it. They use the code younger20. They'll get 20% off of any of our master classes to begin this journey. So, yeah. Thank you, Chris, so much. And we would love to come back sometime and just go further, deeper, explore more. And one of the things we love to leave with and talk about, as in, hey, have us come back and talk about when you have deep emotional connection, how you can then have incredibly dynamic sexual connection. Because we definitely learned through tons of research and schooling. Glenn has his doctorate in sexology. The connection between emotional and sexual is huge.
That absolutely is huge. And thank you for that. I would love to have you guys back another time. I know there's so much more we can dive into. And already within this hour, I feel so inspired and learned so much that I truly do feel that I can now apply and hopefully grow and strengthen my own personal relationship because, and you may have already kind of observed that from the questions I asked. I'm like, and then the way you shared it with me, I'm like, that makes sense. So thank you for that inspiration and the work and time that you shared with me today. It was such a pleasure. You have really incredible energy, and I'm very, very grateful for it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.